Greetings. This is Daphne Garrido. Welcome to Of Darkness and Light. I am going to put a link right up top in the description that is to a video I recorded recently about how I need help immediately. And that is very much the case. And I'm going to put some other links about why I need help and how I could be helped. And links to my stories in the description, because I am a unique case of a schizophrenic person who doesn't have family, that has come to maintain an equilibrium with the mental disability I have through art therapy that I believe has value to the world with a little love. And I'm looking for allies to help me find a foothold within the world of capitalism to survive and not have to be put into a home because my family will not help. And so I have reached out to lots of people and I have tried to make new connections again within my family. And I'm focusing now on making intentions with my subconscious before I reach out to be very kind to the other people's sensibilities. And that has changed some of my language, because my schizophrenic way of living is by letting my subconscious drive me, basically, as I search for help the best I can. And I watch things come through. That's what schizophrenic people are dealing with, is a subconscious takeover to different degrees. But I have, through healing and through plant medicine usage, I believe, really opened myself to my subconscious and learned what exists there and grown to heal it as best I can. And I am on the brink of homelessness and detransition because of a complete crack in the seams of American society in Washington state for a person without family who is my unique breed of schizophrenic, who with privilege would probably never reveal their schizophrenia and just be some kind of meditation instructor or very creative person. But without privilege, I have sought to get help with the literal terminology that I hadn't been diagnosed with, because I knew of the stigma and because my psychologists and psychiatrists were all urging me to seek other means rather than accepting the categorical definition of schizophrenia that is factually accurate for how it would basically put me in a rut because of the societal stigmas enforced and misunderstood. And so I have a lot to say about a lot of things. And I need help. But I'm going to talk about my journey into understanding myself as a woman, for those who I might have called to join me here, who may be struggling with some of the terminology I use. And I'd like to just say up front, I apologize still. My language is a function of dysfunction, of schizophrenic executive dysfunction. I would love to not be cursing at people all the time, to not be so violent with my words. But when I feel perpetrated against, my subconscious speaks in defense, and I allow it because I can't help it. And so I just kind of get wrecked watching people traumatize me from a place inside, and then watching the words come out and knowing that they're helping me feel better in the moment, but feeling wrecked in my feelings for how I'm ruining relationships by uncontrollable reactions, and people can't, don't understand either way. When I became a cracked egg, which is someone who understands that their transness is unavoidable, when your egg cracks, you know it's gonna happen. So it was a Christmas morning. It was about 1 a.m. in the bathtub, and I was crying. And I had been thinking about it for a month or so, maybe not even. It just came back. I've been thinking about it my whole life. So let's start from the beginning. Something always felt wrong in community situations. I remember my grandmother's house. My family was very gender segregated. The men were watching football, hanging out, talking shit. The ladies were in the dining room, gossiping, playing cards, cooking with the kids. I always wanted to be in those spaces. I recognized it immediately how that was my energy. And I also remembered, after my egg cracked, some of my earliest wounds that are effusive because I was so young, but are a remembrance of accumulation, which amount to those times I was around the men and I was chastised and or made fun of and or just looked at sideways for earnest expressions of my feminine character. And I remember it in my grandmother's house specifically, always, right since after my egg cracked. It's by her phone. There was some traumatic instance of someone demonizing a feminine expression at that very place that I don't even remember in detail. But I remember deciding and realizing at that youngest age that I had to not be myself, that I had to work on not showing my feminine side. I didn't have those words, but I was just like, okay, I have to be manly. And that was never anything that fit for me. And so I was a weird, bitter, awkward kid. And in my family, I was made fun of. In my immediate family, I was teased for my feelings. I was told that boys don't cry. My sister was a bully. My sister was an intellectual, physical bully. And my parents had extreme double standards in terms of me not being able to fight back because my older 4-year-old sister, who was bullying me constantly, was a woman. And that is a point I want to talk about. I think people often look at trans women and they're like, you just want the nice things. You're damn right I do. Because I get the bad things from every side. Because when you're in the wrong box, everything's upside down everything's horrible. There's no right answer. You just can't be yourself. So I go to a movie theater when I'm 7 years old after my family has moved to Washington State, and we're in Bonnie Lake, Washington at the Regal Cinema, which had just opened it was recently opened. And we saw Beethoven the Second, or Part 2, or whatever it's called. It's the big St. Bernard dog movie. All I remember is that my mom was definitely there. It might have just been me and her. My sister might have been there. I don't think my dad went to Beethoven. Bonnie Hunt in that movie changed my heart. Hollywood doesn't program kids to be trans. There is nothing about Beethoven Part 2 that transed me. I'm sitting in the theater and I'm watching Bonnie Hunt, who has the biggest, brightest, motherly heart, and I'm recognizing myself in her and what I wish could be my future more than anything. To be that kind of mom who's just the biggest compassionate bag of hugs you could ever have. And there's a teenage girl in that movie, and it's weird because she's like going after a boy, right? And I've never been into boys, but the teenage girl romance aspect was giving me lots of feelings too. It was a whole movie of realizing in the movie theater that I was a woman's spirit, a woman's heart in a male body. And it felt life-changing. It felt like I had discovered who I was. It felt like I never wanted to leave the feeling I had in my heart. And then I walked out of the movie theater. And then I sat in the back of my mom's van. And I was driven home, and I remember that parking lot more than anything because I remember being the saddest person in the world and realizing that I couldn't even tell anybody. It didn't make any sense. I just had to hold it. And so I grew up holding it as best I could, and I made prayers to be switched into different bodies. They started as, please just wake me up and have it be that everything's been changed, and I've always been a woman, and I've always been, I was a girl at that point, right? And my family just doesn't remember. It's okay. Maybe if I don't remember either, and it's just like I have a whole different history, that's fine. I'd love to be the one that remembers the alternate history, though. Maybe that's what I'm praying for. And then after that didn't work, I would just like try and like squinch my eyes closed and like change my body via prayer. I would beg to just be switched into some other person's body across the country or world that was in a female body that wanted a male body. And I was like, just make them not too gross, right? And I will be fine. Like, because I didn't hate my body in terms, as I did. I hated my body. But yeah, no, I'm gonna be honest. I didn't want to be put into like a girl with a really nasty grill, to my estimation, or a really stanky body, or a family that was really creepy, because I was just like, I want a cozy place, so like pick a good one for me. But yeah, I got to the point where I was praying like, just wake me up in a different body, and it's okay if I don't ever remember this life. I made those prayers over and over and over and over again growing up. And I didn't even know trans people existed. I saw on the news once the kind of like horror story they always replayed back then of like, hey, remember that one time there was some military guy who went to Europe and he was the first transsexual to come back after surgery, and everybody was so creeped out about it. And I watched and it creeped me out because I was like, oh no. And I didn't recognize myself in that at all. I did feel some kind of feelings, but I was just like, it was all about the surgery and stuff. And I was like, oh, gross. But then I saw a TV show called Dark Angel when I was a teenager, right? And they had the first honest trans representation I'd ever seen. It wasn't a transvestite hooker on Cops. It wasn't RuPaul. It was somebody who was being honored as a human and a woman who was on a date with a guy. And I was just like, that exists? My heart was doing the exploding thing. I was like, this exists? I was like, people can do that? And it was like, yeah, she had surgeries and stuff. And it's not like my expression of trans femininity, but I was just like, this exists. And I was like, this is like me almost. And then there's a second scene with that character where she goes on a second date with the guy and she's like, hey, hun, I'm a lesbian. I love women. I'm sorry. And I almost died. I remember going to sleep that night just having this like sweetest feeling in my heart. I watched like more of that show and it was just like, where's that character that's me? Because I was just like, that's me. I exist. There are male women who love women and she has a girlfriend. I was like, I exist. And so I grow up and I'm a teenager. I saw pornography. I saw pornography with trans people. I saw pornography with trans women. It's so sexualized and gross. All pornography is so gross. For the most part, I mean, like I haven't seen any that doesn't have any, I don't know. It's just like, I don't do that anymore, right? I grew up, right? But when you're a teenager in the 90s, you're sneaking some porn on the internet. That's just how it goes, dude. Your parents are doing it. You're catching your parents' history of sneaking some porn on the internet. And if you're me, you're calling them on it. When they just like give you general accusations. You're like, dude, I got proof. Anyways. About 20 years old. I don't know how it happens. I remember I finally did all the searching. I looked up what it's like to transition. And when I'm 20, it's 2007. So there's still not a post Caitlyn Jenner performative offer of acceptance towards trans women in culture. There was a window there. I jumped at the window and then they're like, yeah, never mind, we changed our mind. Y'all are just predators. But when I was young, it was just, hey, dude, the information on the internet was like, hey, you need to be passing or you're not going to be allowed to do this. You need to be stealth or you're not going to be able to have a job. If people find you as a male, you're going to have to move and start a whole new life again. Because there was just absolutely no acceptance of, hey, I am a male woman. I am a transgender woman. And that is not something that means I need to be a prostitute. I can be a fully functional human being and be trans feminine. But that's something that's just not really believed in a lot of people's hearts. They're like, you must be mentally diseased to even think that you're a woman. How did you get messed up so bad? And that's cruel. So I knew that was the stakes, and I knew that basically I didn't have the willpower or the courage to talk to my family or my friends. I knew I would lose them all. I knew there was no safe space for me. And so I accepted it. At 20 years old, I accepted to myself, I am a trans woman and I'm never going to do it. That's what I said to myself. I was like, I know what I am. I'm never going to do it. I'm just going to, I didn't even make a better point at that point. I was just like, I'm just not going to do it though. And so I have been my whole life, but I didn't even accept it until I was 20 because of culture. And I lived hating everybody for my familial taught repression of my feminine expression, societally reinforced. I was on sports teams with boys and stuff. It was the 90s, trigger warning. The word fag was used more than you can ever imagine. And gay, if you like did anything limp-wristy, oh, you know what I mean? And it's just like, I'm the limp-wristiest girl in the world when I'm being myself. And it's like, dude, I'm like playing sports and stuff and people are just like, yeah, they probably thought I was gay. No, that's a different energy. Yeah, the gay boy wouldn't hate you all so much. That's a trans girl on your men's sports team, the one who's a liar and smart, and you can't tell what's going on, but they kind of hate everybody, and they're really, really prickly, but sometimes they've got a feminine air to them. That's a trans woman. I couldn't dance because I only dance with my hips. I wouldn't let people take pictures of me because I hated the way I looked so much. I couldn't find romance or even, I couldn't find romance because I couldn't understand how somebody would be attracted to my body because I was so perturbed through my gender dysmorphia. I prayed for part changes, right? I prayed for everything. I just didn't feel right my whole life. And then when I'm 30 years old, I become 34, I'm a meditation instructor. I have a community of spiritual people that do meditations with me in all types of forms. We did solstice and equinox ceremonies, and sometimes it's entirely filled with women. And I'm leading the meditation. I'm the meditation instructor. I'm the ceremonial space leader, and I bring people in to work with me, and we work in tandem, and it's always glorious, and it's always women, and we're creating like women together. And it breaks my heart open to realize that's what I am. And that whole year I'm like, I'm going to try and embody my femininity wholly and just spiritually bypass the part of me that wants to transition and just realize that my soul is what it is and that this is okay. This is my lifetime, and I'm just going to embody my soul in this body without change. And then I realized I could never forgive myself for not trying the thing I looked up when I was 20 that I wanted to do more than anything, which was live on estrogen rather than testosterone. I have to tell you, if you are a male-bodied person who looks up the effects of estrogen transition and you wants it, you're not a boy, dude. That's why the regret rate is so low on gender transition. That's disputed, right? And I'm not trying to say detransition doesn't happen and that it's not an important thing to do to safeguard people from making mistakes, especially teenagers. It's like hardcore safeguards need to be put in place for teenagers making that decision. But at the same time, if you're a child like I was, and you lived in a world with education, you could be living as your gender expression your whole life. And when you get to your teenage years, you could know, hey, I don't want to mess with testosterone, y'all. And I'm for that, because if I lived in a just world, I would have been respected through my androgynous childhood to express with my feminine expression, and I would have been earnestly accepted as the woman I am by the time I was a teenager, and I would have been allowed to do hormones of the correct gender to let me live without significant amounts of dysmorphia. It's medicine, and there's nothing about it that makes people wild and crazy. Trans women have the highest rates of suicide because we live with situations that are basically statutory in nature. A trans woman can't consent, even if they're an adult, when they're in their second puberty. Estrogen is a very interesting thing. It makes you do stuff when you're not protected that you regret later, because your body's changing and it's exciting if you're a woman. And you're wanting for place and you're seeking affection, long wanted. And trans women jump right into relationships with adults that aren't in transition, who use them up and emotionally, mentally cripple them through abuse. Abuse that's seen as the way it is between consenting adults. But then trans women are left emotionally crippled, and everyone makes fun of them for being like children. And people hate every expression of trans women because we're not as pretty as we're supposed to be. In our face, you can tell. Unless you do surgery, it's lose, 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 right? Because I'm sitting here only having done hormones, and people will reject that the hormones are valid, and without them I will die. Because I'm not going to do a third go back to testosterone, which was the biggest horror of my life. When my puberty started, I was crying about it. I was crying about it for a long time. I cried about it to my mother. I told her how the way it was making me feel sick. Because testosterone does stuff to you that doesn't work for a female heart. I just said female heart. I mean a woman's heart. But there's something in my heart. I have a woman's heart. Having a woman's heart and dealing with the mental, physiological, like sexual effects of testosterone inside of a person is the highest level of torture. And to have to imagine going back to that even is the biggest stress. I found comfort in my body at last, despite lingering things that I am living with dysphoria over, right? Dysmorphia. But I'm cozy in my body at last, and I've been disabled, and I've been emotionally crippled, and I'm schizophrenic, and nobody seems to want to help me. And the queer people I know don't like the male woman words, right? And everybody else just doesn't believe me about anything. Or it's too embarrassing. And so I'm trying to build bridges with people who might not understand transness but might have the propensity to. And so what I've done is I've reached out to every woman who, when I was younger, I was crushing on through my heart. And I apologize if anyone's listening who has been offended by things I've sent them. I apologize. I'm sorry for that. But I also have reached out to some people very appropriately, and I have hopes for that. But I haven't heard anything back yet. I've reached out to adults from my community where I grew up, parents of friends, relatives, and my first crush I ever had, which wasn't in Horrible and Lovely. It was a friend of mine's older sister. But that's the thing, is like, this is why I'm doing that. I always crushed with my heart, my woman's heart. The people who shared those vibes with me, they know by feeling of the truth of who I am, if they think about it, if they can go back and feel that feeling again. Because Garrett was a sadist, fakest boy who was angry at everything, who was such a little bitch, who just tore down everything. Just resentment. But then when I connected with women who I loved, whether it was, hey, wow, my whole heart just wants to be friends with you, like girlfriends, and like, I wish I could like comb your hair and stuff. Or like, dang, I want to kiss you. My woman's heart was shining bright, and it changed me on the surface a little to them. And so they might have seen, and it might help them get past stigmas that my generation still hold greatly against trans women in particular. There's a very real thing where I believe women feel traumatized by trans women, cisgendered women, biological women. And it's definitely not fair to the trans women, especially that kind like me. Because sexuality and gender expression are different things. And when you are a trans woman who loves women, but doesn't love the ideology of queerness in our modern world, you're no one's friend. Unless you can wake up some women who love trans women to what it was they were feeling in their heart. Just what love is. It's friendship that you build upon how you want. And so anyways, that's my story. I love you. Please help me if you can, if you're listening. There's lots of ways to help. I need donations so I can pay my utilities in the short term. That's a very big, important thing to me in the now. But I need much more help than that. But still, donations would be very, very helpful. So thank you. And if you're listening, I appreciate you either way. Thank you.